And with that, I'll let you all get settled and welcome in Grace. Will you please give us a kickoff?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Ariana and Ari, Mara, the three of you for being here and for partnering with us so closely and so well for this. This has been a long time in the making. Those of you who are returners, we were hoping to do this in March. Here we are in November, doing it in a virtual way, as we saw last night. We certainly have a lot to learn from Ari and his team, even when we are seeing each other in a Zoom space. And that allows for us to come in our comfy clothes from our couches, our beds, our desks, wherever we may be. So we can just kind of start our weekends together on this Friday morning. Really happy to see you all. I love our wheelhouse talks, but I really miss seeing your faces when we are in Zoom webinar. So happy we can be in Zoom meeting together today. I just want to encourage all of you to fully engage so that you are prepared. We won't be a normal breakout today. So we'll be meeting some new people within this group, and we're excited for that. And that's really the most kickoff that I have, just that I'm really excited for us to engage in this visioning workshop. I personally have my paper and pen, and I'm ready to learn alongside you all. So Ariana and Ari, I think that is most of the kickoff that I need, and I will mute myself and hand it back over to you two.
Thank you so much, Grace. I really appreciate all of the work that's gone into this, and it is really exciting to actually be here with you all. We have found that when we are stuck in the problems of day to day or overwhelmed by the possibilities of the future, visioning is a tool that can help us to get in touch with what we want our lives to look like. As we teach you the ins and outs of visioning, we would love for you to start thinking, what kind of vision do you want to write today? Will it be for yourself as a leader, for a job, your own business, the next learning challenge, maybe a gap year? I started working at Zingerman's Deli about 8 years ago, where I learned about visioning by hearing about the deli's vision for a big building renovation. I was fascinated by how a written document could inspire a really big group of people to work through all the messy and loud challenges of construction. At the time, I only intended to work at the deli for one summer, and I was in the process of applying for other jobs. But since I had a lot of trouble finding another job that I wanted, my coworker encouraged me to write a vision for the kind of business that I wanted to work for. As I wrote that vision, I saw appear on paper that I wanted to work somewhere with awesome people who were dedicated to their work, enjoyed doing it, where I could be myself, where there was good food. And in the process of writing a vision, I wanted to teach visioning to others. In other words, I realized that I wanted to stay and work at Singerman's. So, whatever your vision is in there in the back of your mind, we're here to help you create space to think about the future in a tangible and inspiring way. By the end of this workshop, you will be able to explain the Zingerman's approach to visioning, our recipe for how we write visions for successful futures. You'll also use that recipe to draft your own vision of success. You'll experience what it feels like to share your vision draft with others, and you'll be inspired by the other folks in your breakout rooms and see what a success looks like for them. You'll also connect with other people and resources to help get you through your vision in the weeks and months ahead. At ZingTrain, we really believe in long-term relationships. So know that we can not only help you write your vision, but if you need any extra support to get there, we'll be here, as will, I'm sure, the others in the room today. So to do that, in a minute, we'll have you all introduce yourselves to your breakout groups for today so you know who you'll be engaging with. We'll define what we mean by visioning and share Zingerman's approach to visioning and how it's impacted our organization. Then we'll walk you through the vision recipe so you can write your own first draft, and then you'll have time to share that draft in small groups and hear their visions. Then we'll come back, answer any questions, help you with some next steps, and we'll wrap up promptly at 11. Please note, we will not be taking a formal break, but if at any time you need a break, go ahead and take one. Stand up and stretch, get yourself more coffee, tea, breakfast. We really don't mind if you're eating and drinking in front of us. We are from a food business. Do whatever you need to do to stay engaged. Speaking of which, we start all of our Zing Train training with a review of this training compact. As the trainers today, Ari and I are committed to living our side of the compact, which is the left side. We've prepared, practiced, and we're here to answer your questions and help you through the vision writing process. We ask that you take full responsibility for your learning today. So in the chat, will you please type in what are some things that you can do today to take responsibility for your learning? Yeah, actively listen, take notes, eliminate distractions as you're able. Distractions do pop up. Engage, yes, in all caps. Thank you. Be honest with yourself throughout the process. Yeah, that can be one of the most challenging things. I appreciate that one. Yes, take notes. And reflect. Yes, the visioning process doesn't end today. It will continue going. So we do ask that you reflect and continue the process as well. Awesome. And then at any point, if you have questions, please ask. Odds are there's someone else in the room with that question too. So you're welcome to pause us, put it into chat. Mara will help as well in the chat. Ari and I are going to live our side of the training compact 100%, and we just ask that you live your side 100% as well. Now, I would love to give you all a chance to meet your breakout groups. So we're going to group you into 3-ish person breakout groups so that you can meet them. And while you're in there, we'd like you to introduce yourselves by sharing information, including your name, your current location, and what is one word to describe what makes you most hopeful for the future. This will not follow you into the breakout room, so you can take a picture, or it's also in your breakout group. And I realized that I skipped over. Ari, would you just quickly introduce yourself so that we can hear your voice a little bit? That's an important element of introduction. I can't hear you yet, though.
Muted. It's the class story of 2020. I'm waiting for somebody to make the T-shirt that says I'm muted. It's interesting which story we tell because we can be different people in different settings, even though it's all us. I was just thinking about Ariana's story of the deli. Actually, my story is probably not that it's different, but it's not that different because I also took a job in a restaurant, mostly just so that I didn't have to go home. I grew up in Chicago and had come to Ann Arbor to go to U of M, and I studied Russian history. We're not going to talk about anarchists today, but I studied and write about anarchism quite a bit. And but of course there isn't. I mean, I love history and I'm all for liberal arts. I really believe in it, and Ariana and I can both testify to its long-term value, but there isn't really any job you can get because you have that degree. And mostly I just knew I didn't want to move home. So I ended up taking a job as a dishwasher with the intent of just paying my rent. I don't know how long I expected to be there, Ariana, but I also, without writing a vision, ended up staying in the food business. And I think I can say safely that the visioning work that we're going to share with you this morning is an integral piece of my life and of Zingerman's, and pretty safe to say I would not be sitting here teaching this without visioning. I don't think Zingerman's would be here, and if Zingerman's existed, it would probably be much more in the form of what y'all are used to with things like McDonald's, Olive Garden, or whatever. I mean, it's really a a technique and a process that has changed our lives, as Ariana said so beautifully this morning. So I guess I'm the co-founder of Zingerman's Community of Businesses would be a technical title.
Thank you, Ari.
Thank you, Ariana.
As you go into breakout rooms, another point to note, if you can make sure that your Zoom name on the screen matches your name, and then if you can also put in your pronouns, just so to help people along in the, as you introduce yourselves. And with that, go ahead, introduce yourselves. You'll have about 6 minutes. And then when you come back, keep in mind some of those words that you hear about being hopeful for the future. Mara, are we ready to go into breakout rooms? Welcome back, all. We would love to hear from you. Would you please put into chat, what are some of those words that make you most hopeful for the future? Yeah, seeing some change, exploration, justice, growth, community. Biden, voting, job opportunities, accountability, a vaccine, connections. Fantastic. Would anyone like to share a little bit more out loud? I see intellectual growth, diversity, understanding.
I can say something.
Thank
Hello,
you.
everyone. Mine's like a phrase paired with one word. So I don't know if that, if I
Yes.
could cheat like that. My parents have always instilled this phrase called "your present is your future," meaning how you behave or choose to feel or act right now determines the kind of person you want to be in the future. And I want to pair that with gratitude, because I think you can go either both ways without gratitude. Or if we think about the things that we worry about, it leads you into a black hole. Whereas if you continuously look for things that you're grateful about, that's also another positive black hole where you start noticing more things. Then I think Ari talked about it yesterday. There was a post that I read about why aren't everybody artists or something, the more we try to create beauty. So that's my little 2 cents.
Thank
I love
you.
it.
Excellent.
Is it Yeram?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's Yeram, but I tell people it's Yeram where they can remember like yay and rum. So
And what does it mean?
it's a Korean name. And my parents, so Yesu is Jesus, and then Saram is person, which is like super like overwhelming pressure. It's like I have to be somebody like Christ. I'm like, no.
Yeah. No pressure at all. Got it.
Thank you. Yes, these are all really inspiring, and I look forward to them coming out as we continue. So let me get my screen back up. And Ari, let me welcome you to the stage.
Okay, right when I'm drinking water. Good morning, everybody. On this almost sunny morning. I don't know what it's like up there. But happy to share all this stuff with you. Like I said earlier, this process and this whole idea really changed my life. And in the same way, I said last night that I wish I had known about beliefs when I was in school. I wish I would have known about this when I was in school, because I think it's really a life skill. It's not a business skill. It's something that 100% applicable to everything that we do, every relationship that we have, every project we undertake, whether it's cleaning the garage or starting a nonprofit that deals with hunger all over the world. The visioning work is applicable to all of them. So I'm going to share with you a little bit today of what we learned, how we learned it, and then we're going to spend a good chunk of time having you practice, because I've done this enough times to know that if we just talk about it, all of you will, or almost all of you will be enthused, and only 4 of you will actually do it. Whereas if we do it while you're here, all of you will do it, except for the 3 that roll your eyes and decide to go make coffee or do something else while in the exercise. But I really encourage you to do it. For context, I will say that when I first started learning about this way back in the early 90s, I was very skeptical and fairly cynical about it. And I'm a little bit like the convert who kind of started skeptically and then became ever more passionate about it. And now I've been teaching it for decades, and I believe in its value and its power, as Ariana demonstrated so beautifully this morning in her personal story, to change lives. So on the screen right now, what you can see is the way we define vision. If you go to a business school or you read a lot of business books, you're going to find an array of different visions. I'm not here to say the other ones are wrong. I'm just here to tell you that this is the one that we use. So vision for us means that at a particular point in time in the future, and so when you do one later, you're going to put a literal date on it. So a particular point in time in the future, when you describe what success looks like with enough detail, richly engaging, emotionally meaningful detail, that's your vision. Okay. So if this is not the standard business school version of a sort of 3-line, we provide the most interesting specialty foods to Southeastern Michigan. Like, that's boring. A vision is going to talk about the way people who work in our organization feel at a particular point in time in the future. It's going to talk about how the community relates to us. It's going to talk about how we feel as participants about the work we do. It's going to give a rough estimate of size, and it's going to be a lot longer than just the definition on the screen or a little bit of 3-line, 4-line formal vision statement. Okay. So Ariana, you want to keep us going? So let me just, I didn't give much history really before, but so the interesting thing with vision, I mentioned last night, if you were on, that I wrote an essay in part 1 of the book, which is called 12 Natural Laws of Business. And when I was working on part 3 of the book, which is the book on managing ourselves, it sort of dawned on me that not only were those natural laws of business true for organizations of all sorts, but they were also true for individuals of all sorts. And so I started to realize that not only were healthy businesses living in harmony with nature, but healthy people were also living in harmony with nature. And that the first one on that list is that successful organizations and successful people, and I don't mean the ones necessarily making the most money, I mean the ones who are living the life of their choosing in a holistic and grounded way, that those people have a vision of where they wanted to go. Now, the vision might have been in their head and they might not have written it down the way I'm going to teach it to you today, but they definitely had one. If you go in history, you're going to find it going back into the Bible. You're going to find vision in every social movement in history. You're going to find vision at the start of every company, whether it's what are now big companies like Ford Motor Company or General Motors. I mean, somebody started those businesses as little small businesses, the same way you might go out and start a business. If you look at Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi, those are all people, Nelson Mandela, in their head, they had a vision of what they were trying to create that was different than what was, and they were very good at communicating it in a meaningful way to other people. So what I want to suggest is that in an unconscious way, they were just doing what seemed like was necessary and what seemed like the right thing. But it's actually, what I want to suggest is it's a skill that we all have. And our work today is to try to help show you how you can do what anybody you looked up to was already doing without this recipe, right? So we've seen, in essence, it's like we saw these great cooks just go up with a pan and a bunch of ingredients and whip up this amazing dinner, which is awesome. But for you and I, we want to get the recipe and actually start slowly and be able to learn how to cook so that 10 years down the road, we can work with that same perceived level of ease that that great chef was cooking with. So when Paul and I opened the deli way back in 1982, you can see it was a nice winter day with no leaves on the trees and kind of gray. And when we opened, we did not have a written vision the way that we're going to teach it to you today. But being a history major as I am, I know that all history is sort of made up by piecing together what we believe happened. Those of you who were there last night, by the way, history is changed by what we believe, because what we remember is altered by what we believe. And without getting a lot into social stuff, but if you look at American history and you look at race, you're going to see that because so much of the history of racism, et cetera, was written out of commonly told history, it alters the way people perceive the current situation, right? So this is true for our own lives. It's true for organizational lives as well. Just tying this together with beliefs for a second. But anyway, if I were going to have said that we wrote a vision in 1982, we didn't, but in our heads, these were the 6 things that I would have put in there. We knew that we wanted something unique. Like Yeram said, I really believe that business is like art. I want something in our work that's unique. I believe that every human being is unique. And I believe actually this visioning process is one of the best ways I know to enhance and support that uniqueness. We can talk more about that later, but we really wanted something special. We didn't want a copy of New York or Chicago or try to replicate something somebody else was doing. We wanted to create our own thing that was true to us and true to the ecosystem we were working in. We wanted great food and great service. From the beginning, we were very committed to having a great place to work, even though we only had 2 people, plus me and Paul in that little building. And we knew from the beginning that we only wanted one. This is back to the idea of art. And I always wanted this destination spot that people would come to, whether it was from Grand Rapids or San Francisco or Paris, that people were going to be coming a long ways and having this amazing experience. And when they had that experience, they would never forget it. And even if it was years before they came back, they would still be remembering it. I actually talked to a guy who's got way more money than I'm ever going to see in my life, and probably that all of us have put together. And I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but he actually flies his private plane to Ann Arbor from wherever to eat lunch at the deli. And I'm like, wow, I don't think I'm ever going to be in that boat. But the reality is, it's clearly a destination spot for him, and clearly he could go anywhere and eat anywhere. And so the fact that that's the place that he chooses to spend his available resources to come is an interesting compliment. And at the same time, what's important to me too is that people who have very little means are still trying to find ways to come and be able to eat, and we're trying to find ways to make it available to them through blue plate specials, through splitting orders and making things affordable for people who have less wherever we can, while still providing really quality food and quality service experience. So that's what we kind of had in our heads in 1982. In 1986, we added a little bit onto that building. In 1991, we renovated that house next door, which you can see is off to the right of the sketch of the deli in the middle of that nice drawing. It's got little blue windows and a gray roof that looks like a hat. And then, so we opened 82 in 1993. So this is 11 years in, 11 and a half, because it was the summer. Paul, my partner, you saw his back walking into the deli in that photo, wearing his old leather jacket when he still had hair. But anyway, he sat me down on the bench in front of the deli at about 10 o'clock in the morning. And if anybody's worked in restaurants that do a busy lunch business, you know that 10:30 is really your busiest period of your workday, because you're scrambling hard to get ready for the lunch rush. So it really wasn't the most opportune time for him to sit me down. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, okay, in 10 years, what are we doing? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like, come on, in 10 years, what are we doing? I mean, we had this idea that we were only going to have one. So because of that, we're turning down these offers from other cities to open a Zingerman's in Chicago or Detroit or whatever. And because we're not copying our store, people are opening on campus and they're filling the market need that we could have filled. And, you know, what are we doing in 10 years? I'm like, dude, I don't know. I got work to do. And he's like, this is our work. So knowing Paul as I do now, all these years later, I could say safely he probably couldn't sleep for like 3 weeks worrying about it, maybe 3 months. And in essence, in our current linguistic construct, what he was asking me is, what's your vision? I mean, he didn't say it that way because we didn't talk about visions, but I know enough now that he had essentially an intuitive sense that we had fulfilled that original vision of our business. For context, when we opened the deli in '82, the general wisdom in Ann Arbor was we were doomed to fail. Ann Arbor had 10 or 12 delis go out of business in the previous decade. Everybody told us it was a bad neighborhood and we shouldn't open there. If you've been there, you know there's still no parking to this day. And most of you aren't old enough to remember, but before cell phones, most people didn't have phones in their pockets, and they definitely didn't have maps with them. And so all the one-way streets made it exceedingly confusing for people from Grand Rapids, Toledo, Detroit, or wherever. So everybody was pretty sure we'd be out of business within the first year. By the way, the statistics in the food business are 85–90% of restaurants close within a year. So they had good reason to believe that. But anyway, 5, 6, 7 years later, we were considered geniuses. I like to, I'm not going to pull the exact quote, but I like to paraphrase the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, who was from then say Sri Lanka. He said, all revolutionary ideas go through 3 stages. Stage 1, it's completely impossible. It'll never work. That was where we started. Stage 2, well, it might be possible, but it's not very practical. And stage 3, my favorite, I was behind it from the beginning. I tell you that, and I actually tell it in our new staff orientation too, because I want to encourage you to go after your dreams and to understand that when you're going after them, most people, perhaps even your parents, won't like them. Most great things that have been achieved were thought to be stupid. Most great things that were achieved were thought originally to be impossible, impractical. They're dreamers. It'll never work. 10 years, 20 years, 50 years later, everybody thinks they were geniuses from the beginning. But the reality is it takes a lot of self will to push through that dissonance and push past that criticism. And the visioning work, I think, is one way to do that. And that's part of why we survived through all that initial skepticism, was that we had this vision in our heads. And that allowed us to stay resilient and stay focused, even when everybody thought we were crazy. So Paul, when he sat me down in '93, was wondering what our vision was. I don't think he had a new one, but he had this idea that we had achieved that first vision. So I'm going to compare it in your world to finishing college. It was a ton of work. You busted butt. At times you doubted yourself. You finally made it. You get that degree. And then you realize it's only the beginning. I as somebody who I run when I go, well, everywhere, but when I'm out of town. So I always say it's like running in San Francisco. When I get to a hill, I'm like, all right, I could do this hill. But then when I get to the top of the hill, I look up and there's like 7 more hills. And I'm like, man, I thought I was done. So the reality of life is that a good problem, not natural law number 9 on that natural laws list, is success means we get better problems. A really good problem is you fulfilled your original vision. And then you got to write a new one. So Paul and I spent a year going from 1993 into 1994 trying to figure out the answer to his question. And what we ended up with was the first time that we actually wrote a vision. We learned from Stash Kazmierski, and I'll tell you more about him in just a second. And that vision was about 6 pages long, and it described that we would create this community of businesses, all located here in the Ann Arbor area, because I have a very strong belief personally about doing business in the town in which we live so that we're present. It talked about opening other businesses, but rather than doing what everybody else does by opening more delis, we would open others Zingerman's businesses. So they would have different specialties. Some of you may know them already. Zing Train is what we're doing today, our training business, but the bakery, the creamery, Miss Kim, our little Korean restaurant, the Roadhouse, which is all regional American food, et cetera, et cetera. And that each business would have managing partners so that we could have somebody in that business like Ji-Hae Kim at Miss Kim, who has a passion for what that business does. And that way you have an owner on site, because in my experience, there was just a big energetic difference when there was an owner present with passion than when you just were like in the 17th unit of the chain with the manager reporting to the regional manager, reporting to the vice president. It just kind of loses its energy, right? So, so that vision we rolled out, like I said, 6 pages long, and we rolled it out in 1994, and it was called Zingerman's 2009 because we set that vision 15 years into the future. A long time. Most everybody hated that vision too. The business school people thought we were insane because we were turning down the chance to franchise like everybody else and make a lot of money. On and on, really nobody liked it. And then 10 or 12 years later, of course, everybody thought we were geniuses again because it was local and entrepreneurial and really brilliant. So again, this pattern continues to be repeated throughout our work. And I think it's a universal truth for all of us. By the way, if you want to read a good book to help you stand up to your family, don't tell them I told you this, but is called Ignore Everybody by Hugh MacLeod, MacLeod. It's one of my favorite books. It's not a long read. Oh, Ariana's, you are awesome. Do you always have it right there, or you just happen to be? It's right near my books too. I'm honored. As a book person, I often think about which books sit next to each other on the shelves and what that means and how they feel about it. But anyway, fast forwarding from there in 2006 and then 7, we worked on the next vision because we were almost to 2009, which seemed shocking when we wrote it in 94. It seemed like 100 years into the future, but we were almost there. In 2007, we finished our 2020 vision. That was about 9 pages long. I will say on a personal level, I remember I'm not a big holiday person. We were open pretty much every day. And I remember, Ariana, I don't know if you've ever heard me say this, but I remember going into the deli the morning of New Year's Day in 2009. It'll make me cry now. And I started my journaling and I wrote the date 1109, and I like started tearing up because it's like this thing that it was so far in the future, it was unimaginable. And yet, I don't know, 80% of what we wrote really happened. And it made me realize like why parents cry at weddings so much, because they've envisioned it for so long that then it's like it's happening, and it really taps back into the emotion that you put into your vision when you wrote it, in the same way they've imagined this future for you. Whether you or I live it or not is a different story, but when when it happens in a way that they like, it does, or we like, it does bring the tears out. And then fast forwarding again, over the last few years, and Ariana helped participate in the work on it. We wrote our 2032 vision. That'll put us at 50 years as an organization, which, like I said, in an industry where, you know, nearly 90% go under in the first year, that'll be quite a achievement of sustainability and continuity in our community, which I feel very positive about. So anyway, that's the history of our visions. We didn't, Ariana, I don't know if we said people should throw questions into the chat as we go, because I can handle reading them and keeping up with what I'm doing at the same time. But let me just pause for a second before I move forward and see if anybody has questions. I like when you ask because it shows me you're not asleep.
I have a question.
Awesome.
So, I mean, we're college students. We don't know exactly what we want to do with our lives right now.
Yeah.
And we don't even really know what our options will be given when we graduate. And so
Epidemiologist seems like a really good field. No.
yeah. So I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for if your future is uncertain, kind of like all of ours are. How would you go about when we get
Yeah.
today, create our vision? What should we be focusing on most, like personal growth or because we don't know what our careers will exactly look like.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. The reality is no one actually knows. They just pretend like they know. That's really true. So when you do the hot pen work in a little bit, I think your question is spot on. What I'm going to suggest, and I believe in it because I've experienced it, is you're just going to put yourself whatever you want, 3 years, maybe a year, 5 years into the future, and you're going to write. It doesn't matter if you know what you're going to write, you just keep writing. Okay. And you're going to describe where you're at in that future. And so my experience is you may not know what job you want, but Ariana actually gave us an awesome example earlier this morning. What you do know, I don't know this, but it's not unlikely you want to work with interesting people. It's not unlikely you want to feel good about your job. You probably want to feel like your job contributes to the world or, whatever. And, you may not know exactly where you want to live, but you might be able to probably know you want to live in the Midwest or you want to live on the coast. You want to live in a big city. You want to live near the water. You want to live, so things that we think we don't know, but we actually do know. And I'm just making stuff up. But if you said, I want to live on the coast, well, that might end up being on the west coast of Ireland. It might end up being in Guatemala on the coast or just on Lake Michigan on the coast, but you're drawn to the water. And so part of what I love about this visioning process is that it allows things like that are normally completely excluded from your conversation with career counselors, but they're actually really, really important, right? So like Ariana and I both like books. So I could tell you who knew what job I was going to have, but I was definitely going to be reading, right? I love learning. I love music. And so like the actual job is a piece, but it's not that critical. That said, there's other people that are on this call this morning that are like, no, dude, I want to teach fourth grade. It's been my dream since I was a little kid. My fourth grade teacher was one of the most influential people in my life. That's what I want to do. And that's also awesome, right? So I think the point is the specificity be about what society judges to be the correct specificity, but it could just as easily be that you traveled, it could say you've moved every year for 3 years and that you had it would be like normal to write, I had no idea that this job would have played out the way it did, but I'm so thrilled the way it worked out.
Okay, thank you so much. That makes
Does
sense.
that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
This is a process that's actually perfectly suited, I think, to the reality that none of us actually know, but we have so much social pressure to pretend like we know, and then we got bullshit answers to tell everybody. Well, maybe I'm going to be, or you say you're going to be a fireman or you're going to be a whatever, an astronaut. And then when you're 14, it's something else. And then when you're 20, it's like, well, I'm thinking of going in. If you know, awesome, do it. But if you don't know, I think that you know the kind of life you want to lead. And that's really the right question. And I guess I should say and then Megan put a nice question in chat. I'll answer that, Ariana, and then I'll move forward. When Paul and I gave the commencement speech, and I don't know if I should say this, but I never went to any of my own graduations, but I did show up at the one we were speaking at, and I think it was 2015. And I realized, and this is relevant to your question, Olivia, when you're in school, like what's the question everybody asks you? Like, what are you going to do next? What are you going to, and I realize it's completely the wrong question in my belief. My belief is the right question is what kind of life do you want to create? And it's very much aligned with what Yeram said, like the way we live today is what we're creating for the future. Start now, right? So what kind of life you want to create might include a job or it might not, but it definitely would talk about your relationship to your friends and family, to your community, to your work, to yourself. And those things can be super clear, even if you don't know what title is going to be on the business card you have. Does that help? Okay, awesome. Megan, great question. I'm a big Irish fan. by the way, if anybody needs a good read, John O'Donoghue's stuff is awesome. I think y'all got the newsletter in your packages. And there's an article I wrote that quoted him quite a bit. So how my background in Russian history and anarchism has informed me. So a couple things I would say, and actually, Ariana, you could tell them when I'm done, you could tell them your study areas too, because it might help. So to be clear, I never went to business school, and I never went to culinary school. I love school. I think school's great. So I mentioned last night in the natural laws list that strengths lead to weaknesses. So one of the strengths of people who study like medicine in very detailed order for whatever decade and a half that you need to go through residency and do all that stuff is that they get very deep into one field. So I used to live with a woman who's an orthopedic surgeon. She's very good at it. Her subspecialty is pediatric orthopedics, and her subspecialty is doing arthroscopic surgery through spine surgery through the scope on little kids, right? Okay, so she's like 6 people in the country who's really great at that. The challenge becomes what's the weakness? It's so narrow that you become really, really great at that, but you don't have time to read poetry because you're working 70 hours a week and you got to keep up with all the medical developments. Liberal arts has the other way. We may not be great at anything, but we learn how to pull things together from diverse fields. And in the same way that the healthiest ecosystems are the most diverse, I'm going to suggest the best learning is from diverse sources. And I'm going to suggest also, having written an essay on creativity, which is in part 3 of the book, mostly creativity is merely connecting things that were not previously connected in new ways. Okay, so I've referenced books. Gutenberg, who invented, in quotes, the printing press, all he did was take the same thing they used to press grapes to make wine and put paper, ink, and letters into it, and he had a printing press. So really all it is connecting stuff that already existed in different formats and putting it to work in a new way. And everything comes from that. Megan, does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. And then anarchism is a whole nother conversation, but it's embedded really in a lot of what I do. And I write a lot about anarchism and its application to modern organization. And because anarchism is, despite what the previous president keeps saying, it's not about chaos and violence. It's really about a respect for every individual and a belief that everybody's an intelligent, creative human being, and that none of us are better or worse than the other. We're just different, right? And so I really believe that what's now called progressive business actually is very closely related to what anarchists were writing about 100 years ago. And I just did an e-news yesterday. Mara can throw the link in the chat about how we use consensus process here at Zingerman's. It's a business. And I think, although rarely told story, it's actually one of the key parts of what's made us what we are. And Ariana, I was just going to let you tell your study story and let them see that your background is at work too.
Yes. My major was a double major in environmental science and economics. My senior research was on seagulls in the Caribbean. So a very ecosystem based. So it was really fascinating to me to work in a business that talked about people being important, great service being important, but also finance, great food, and developing a community and ecosystem. Actually ended up matching really well with the seagull studies, a little metaphorically, but it is fascinating how much that pops up in the Zingerman's work.
I'm just thinking, Ariana, it's on the top of my list now, is working on the essay on organizational ecosystems. And I think clearly we should do a Zing Train seminar around it. And maybe you and I should be the co-teachers, since you actually studied it and I don't really know any.
I'll see if I can drop in some seagull knowledge while we're at it.
Yeah, well, there is seagull management. We could talk about that later. Okay. Let's move forward. Awesome questions, y'all. So these are the books I've been referencing, and Megan, you can see it says lapsed anarchist in there, which is a long story. I'm less and less lapsed and more back to anarchism. And part 2, which is the red one, and part 4, which is the blue one, have the most about anarchism, but it's in. Okay, let's keep going. The managing ourselves, by the way, on the top is where the personal visioning essay is pulled from, that you have the pamphlet that you can draw on to help you with the work we're doing today. So when we talk about a vision, whether it's the one that Paul and I had in our heads back in 1982, whether it's one that you write today, whether it's the one that Stephen Jobs had for Apple, or that your whatever teacher had for their class this semester, it has these 4 elements. It's inspiring. It's strategically sound. That means you have a reasonable shot at getting there. If it's super inspiring, but you have no shot at getting there, we call that a fantasy. Fantasies are also good. So like, I can fantasize that I'm going to be Michael Jordan, but it's not going to happen. You could fantasize that next week you're going to be a billionaire living on the west coast of Ireland, or you're going to have this internationally known nonprofit that you start on Monday is famous by Friday, but that's not going to happen. So there's a creative tension between pushing yourself to greatness. And when I say greatness, by the way, it's greatness of your choosing, not anybody else's, and the strategically sound part. So you got to have a reasonable shot, and you want to push yourself so you're really challenged. The third thing is we write it down. This is the part you're going to practice in a minute. And the fourth is that we communicate it. And in an organization, that's particularly important. So Ariana talked about hearing about the vision for the Delhi construction project and how impactful that was for her. I will say in an organization, very few people that work on a front line will ever have heard anything remotely like a vision. They just mostly hear, here's your job. If you need me, I'm over there. So communicating is important. And I'm going to suggest, even if it's a personal vision, it's still important, because although it takes a lot of courage, but starting to share the vision that you wrote with your friends, with your family, with your cat, all of those things bring power to it and bring it alive in a meaningful way. And it's not, I understand it's not easy to share it with families. You know, just for context, like we had opened in Delhi in 1982. It was probably 10 years down the road, by which point we in the New York Times 2 or 3 times. We had like 150 employees, and we were gaining national acclaim. And my mother would still annually ask me if maybe that fall I would take the LSA. Just for context, okay? It stops. You're going to be 70 and they're still going to be asking you why you didn't. But the point is to pursue the life of your dreams. And I'm not suggesting be disrespectful to your parents or anybody, but in the end of the day, it's really about your vision, not theirs. And by the way, I came to realize that when people are giving, has anybody on the call gotten advice from anybody? Yeah. So when they're giving you advice for your life, essentially they mean well, but essentially what they're doing is sharing their vision of the life you should lead. In the absence of information, other people fill it. In the ecosystem, in the absence of healthy plants, weeds will fill the ecosystem. So the more you share a positive vision of your own creation, the more it's going to push that other noise away. When we don't share our own, they're filling that space for us, and they got really clear visions of what they want you to do. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. It's just their vision is not necessarily, it may align with yours totally, or it may not. Okay, good. Okay, Ariana. So I've kind of referenced this a little bit, but just to be clear, vision is not just for you. It's really a life skill, like I said early on when we started. So I'm going to suggest to you that if you do this regularly for a couple, 3 years, it ultimately changes your brain for the better. Okay. Maybe not you, but I and most people I know were raised essentially to see what was wrong. We're trained to problem solve. We're trained to figure out quickly who's in our way and who's blocking us from getting to success, or who's annoying us and making us crazy. But all of those are negative pursuits. So in the back going back to last night, they're negative beliefs that are not going to lead us to a positive future for ourselves. They make noise and they generate energy, but they don't create positive ecosystems with or without seagulls that we want to create for the future. So once you start to use this, you start to realize that for anything you have anxiety or unclarity about, writing a vision is an awesome thing. So when I'm going to give a talk and I'm really nervous about the talk, I just sit down in 10 minutes, I draft a vision for what the talk's going to be like, and it helps me calm down. When I'm super, super anxious about the talk, I have gone on stage and read the vision to the audience. Because of course, when they know where I want to go, they get behind me and they want to help me, right? And I'm making myself vulnerable from the heart and sharing what I aspire to do, which is going to help them and create a good experience. So we have Katie Frank, who's the partner at Zinc Train, I know wrote a vision for her wedding. People write visions for their holidays, for their vacations. To be totally honest, I don't know how the heck they let us into college without writing a vision for what we're going to get out of it. Because duh, if you don't know where you're going, what's going to happen? Right? So I always reference this. Anybody read Alice in Wonderland or have it read to them as a child? So there's the classic story of Alice is walking along the road. She comes to the fork in the road. She looks up because she's unsure of which direction to go. She looks up and she sees that nice Cheshire cat sitting in the tree. And so because it's Alice in Wonderland, she asks the cat, which road should I take? And the cat wisely asks, well, where are you going? And she says, well, I'm not really sure. And the cat says, well, then any road will take you there. Right? So this visioning process can be really for anything. I have a friend who works, I don't want to be grim, but she works in the cancer, and she started to use visioning with her end of life patients, because knowing how, you know that at that stage you're going to die. We can be in denial when we're in college, but at that stage, I mean, it's sad, but people know it, but it gives them a chance to have, I mean, control's a strong word, but to have a strong influence over the way that that happens and how they feel when it happens, and to describe. So, I mean, as far as that may feel from where you are in your life right now, this is really applicable for everything, okay? And ultimately through neuroplasticity, it changes your brain so that you start to just instinctively think that this way. And I really believe, and Ariana can comment if she wants, but I think this is really one of the biggest parts of what makes our organizational culture healthy and successful, is that most people who've worked here for a decent amount of time have internalized the visioning process. So they quickly, although we still think something's wrong, we quickly self-manage past that and start to work on what we actually want, and even write down a vision rather than just complain. Let's keep going, Ariana.
How about a vision example?
I think that's an awesome idea. So I'm going to read you one. It's in part 1 of the book, which again, this is my super beat up copy, which is like been to Ethiopia, Ireland, the Netherlands, and countless cities in the US and Canada. This is a vision that we wrote many years ago for the West Side Farmers Market, which is a little farmers market outside the Roadhouse on Thursday evenings. So it was not meant to replace or compete with the main Ann Arbor Farmers Market, which is Saturday mornings deli, which is really big and booming. This was meant to be a little community shoulder market so that people could come park, bring dogs, not much traffic. You could get in there on a Thursday evening when there wasn't fresh produce from farmers necessarily available. It was written in 2005, but we, as you'll see in a minute, we always place them in the future and we write them as if they're already in the future. So this one was written for 5 years out, so 2010, okay? So I'm just gonna read it to you. It's the longest day of the year. The sun's pinnacle of warmth and light. Throngs of people are milling around the Roadhouse parking lot on this Thursday afternoon, amazed and excited at the abundance of locally produced goods and services, ranging from several gorgeous tomatoes to handmade soap and artisan crafts, plus a very strong energy of Zingerman's items. Every vendor is selling the best of what they offer, growing or producing themselves what they sell. There's a tangible truth patrons have come to trust, that all these products have a story and none of them traveled very far to get here. Tents and awnings cover the stalls, creating a colorful and festive mood. There are 15 to 20 vendors at the market, so it's accessible and maintains variety, but remains magnetic and welcoming. The market continues to provide our customers with the best products available and serves as a catalyst for community development by offering an educational component and a local music scene. We have space reserved for weekly scheduled acts, including local musicians, demonstrations, and educational activities. Several people recognize the Roadhouse chefs selecting vegetables from the market's vendors. The market is a family event where parents bring their children after school and meet to shop for fresh produce. After shopping, families enjoy a snack from the roadshow at our picnic tables. Guests are thrilled with the produce, the chance to visit with neighbors, and best of all, connect with the farmers who actually grow their food. So it goes a little longer, but I think you got the idea. Maybe throw some words in the chat of what resonated for you with that.
The specific feelings, that sense of community, focus on local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this goes back to the question before, like you don't really know what you want, but I think in the context of those vivid pictures, clear focus, you can see that you do know what you want. And so the business school version of vision is very emotionless. Okay, even having a title, even if it's the one you want, there's no emotion in the name, whatever you pick, teacher, professor, geologist, anthropologist, they're awesome. It only comes alive because in your head, you have the spiritual component of it that you've imagined so much more than just being an anthropologist. Vision brings that part of it alive while still including the data and facts that are meaningful. So how much money one wants is very subjective, right? So I don't really care how much money you have, but you might. And if you say in 2 years, I have 10,000 in the bank, or you have $1 million in the bank, it's up to you, but they're pretty different. So 10 or 12,000 or 15,000, it doesn't require much different work. But if you want to have $10 million in 3 years, maybe that's a fantasy, but if that's what you want to have, it requires very different work than if you want to have 10,000. Okay. So saying some numbers or range of numbers or some concrete things, but not so much that you've pinned yourself into the corner. And then putting the emotion that comes alive, like Megan's got her cat. If that's meaningful, then write your cat into the vision. If you love music, write what music is playing. If you love sunny days, write that. If you like gray, gloomy days, write that. If you feel close to your mother, then write in that you talk to your mother. Like the point is to bring alive the pieces of your life that you imagine in the future that are meaningful for you. Okay? You with me? Okay. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. Here's the 8-step vision recipe that we're going to walk you through. In order to do this, you need to choose a topic. Ariana gently suggested earlier that you might think about it, but you probably didn't, because I probably wouldn't have either. But think now of a topic. So I think your personal life, your life is a good one, but it could really be for anything. If it's for Thanksgiving dinner and you're not going home because of the pandemic, it could be for that. If it really, whatever's meaningful, okay? In order to make this work, though, you need to pick a topic. The good news is that the recipe is applicable for everything. So once you learn this, you can use exactly the same recipe, whether you're writing a vision for Zingerman's as a $60 million company, or whether you're writing a vision for a first date you're going to have, it's the same thing, okay? The second piece is to pick a time frame, and that's to get into the future. The further you go into the future, the easier it is to stop trying to fix the current problems. Okay, so if you write a vision for next week, it's hard to really let go of the realities of the pandemic. if you write a vision for 10 years from now, I think it's safe to say the pandemic's going to be ancient history. And you'll look at pictures of yourself with a mask on and go, oh God, remember that year? Right. So the further you go into the future, the easier it is to sort of let go of what you're struggling with today and imagine the future. And I'm okay with either of those. The next thing, and this is what you're going to do in a minute, is to write a list of prouds. This is just to get your brain in a positive place. And then you're going to write the first draft. And that's what you're going to do today. And we can come back to the other stuff in a little bit. Okay. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do right now, I'm going to give you a minute before you do prouds to pick a topic. If it helps you to write it down, do that. If you're not sure and you're struggling, then ask a question and I'll help you. There's no wrong topic. Good. Okay, and then pick a time frame, and I would suggest the more specific, the better. So a particular date in a particular year, because it's going to help you evoke the setting. And because if you're writing it in March and you're in Michigan, it's not going to be 78 degrees, even though my fantasy dictates that's what I would want. Okay, so everybody should have a topic and a date. Okay, the next thing is just 2 minutes of work to write down prouds. So really, this is just to put your mind in a positive place. We're not collecting them. You can't flunk. If you're agonizing over it, just write down, I'm a really good worrier. Okay, so the instructions are on there. Get a blank piece of paper or a blank page on the computer, and then write as many things you can that you feel proud of in your life leading up to today. It could be like the outfit you're wearing right now. It could be that you listened to great music last night. It could be the kind of coffee you picked to brew is really awesome. It could be whatever you want. It could be in 4th grade, you wrote an awesome poem. List as many things as you can. They can either be the thing that you did, or it could be how it felt when it happened. So if you ran a race and won a marathon, you could put that feeling down. If you landed a great job or a great internship, it could be that. Okay. So the more, the better. We're going for quantity, not quality. We're not collecting them. And if you were sitting next to each other and you were stumped, I'd suggest you copy each other, but you do that on Zoom. Ariana, are you timing?
I'm timing. Ready, set, go. All right, that
Wow.
is your timer.
That was cool. So just set that aside. It's just to get you in a good space. And the thing to do is to get a blank page, either on paper or the computer. And then I'm going to give you these instructions, and then we're going to give you 10 minutes to start, not start, we're going to give you 10 minutes to write the first draft of your vision. Okay. So you're going to have your topic, and at the top of the page, you're going to write whatever date you picked. So if it was a year, I don't know what today is, the 12th, 13th, Friday the 13th. So if you write a year from now, you would write it's November 13th, 2021, and you're going to describe everything that's happening, right? So when you do the vision, here's some things to suggest. Goal for greatness. Now, remember, greatness is your definition, not mine, not your mother's, not your professors, not your advisors, not your best friends. So it could say you're working a lot. It could say you're working a little. It could say you graduated with honors. It could say you dropped out. These are all up to you, not up to me. Okay. So greatness is a personal thing, not a socially imposed greatness. Right from the heart. This is not an exercise in what you should do. This is not an exercise in what the statistics say that women of your graduating class need to do. This is not an exercise in what people advise people of your generation, whatever you are, to go and do. This is from your heart, okay? The third thing is, I'm guessing you have a lot of voices in your head that are not your own. I have a lot of in my head that are not my own. Over the 8 decades of my maturing, I've moved them mostly to the back of the room, but they're still in there sitting in the last row in the auditorium, and I can still hear them sometimes. So in your case, they're probably louder, but if you could ask them to go outside and maybe take a walk around the block while you're doing this, that would be awesome, because they're not going to be helpful. And then remember, you're writing in the future. So it's November 13th, 2021, if that's what you picked, and you're describing what's happening in that day, looking back on now. Okay. If I were doing, I would talk about how the vaccine really helped and what a relief it is to be able to get on a plane and travel again, or whatever, go out to eat. Okay. When you write, it's really, really important to the effectiveness of this process that you go quickly. The faster you write, the better it works. We call it hot pen. Paul Jones referenced it last night. The faster you write, the better it works. If you don't know what to write, that's legit. Get to that point. I just write swear words, but you could write the Lord's Prayer or the starting lineup for the Grand Rapids team of whatever it is, or whatever you want to write, but keep writing. If you write enough curse words in a row, other things will come out. Okay. But holding the pen and staring at the paper doesn't count. You could just write the stupidest thing I ever got asked to do. I can't believe I'm doing. But if you just keep writing, good things emerge. I guarantee it. Okay. And then make it personal. So like I said, your cat, the music, the weather, the coffee, what sweater you're wearing, the things that other people think are irrelevant, I'm going to suggest are meaningful. I don't mean what job you have is irrelevant, but it does matter how you feel about yourself, and the little things of comfort that make a difference in your life. Don't leave those out. Okay. Any questions before we get going? So when we say start, you're going to keep writing until Ariana's little chime thing goes off and tells you to stop. Good to go?
To answer Lauren's question, for now, just write about whatever time frame is most important for you, or whatever.
Pick a time frame. You can later go back and write other ones, but for today's 10 minutes, just pick something.
Excellent.
It's not going to National Vision headquarters in your file or anything, so no one has to know later what you wrote.
This is a first draft.
Oh yeah, thank you, Ariana. At the top of the page, please write 5 letters. I almost forgot. D like David, R like Richard, A like anarchist, F like food, T like Tom. This is only a draft. It is the beginning, not the end. You are not obligated to do anything you write. You can completely ignore it and start over again later today or tomorrow. Okay. So it's just a draft. You're not getting graded. You can't fail. In fact, you probably already got an A. Okay. Good to go.
Yes,
Okay,
timer.
Ariana,
Good.
start that clock ticking. We'll just sit here, and if you get stuck, put some in the chat. Is that what they should do?
Yeah. Welcome back. Good to see you all back. How many people found it powerful to read your vision aloud? Why don't you do a thumbs up, raise hand? Yeah, awesome. How about raise your hand if you were inspired by hearing another person's vision? Those some quick hands. Fantastic. We'd love for you to hear from a couple of you. So if you would either type in the chat or unmute yourself, we'd like to hear out loud too. What were some of the things you heard that you were inspired by in the visions that you heard?
One of the things in my breakout group that we all kind of shared in common and we're talking a lot about specifically toward the end is kind of like our environmental future, not just for ourselves, but like on the planet as a whole, and how that's going to look in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And I think that that kind of got us all thinking about what we can do right now to make that a reality, you know, within our communities and in our daily kind of consumption habits and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Megan.
My group is super interesting because I think some of us, I keep using this analogy, but some of us focused on the forest and some of us focused on the trees. So I got really caught up in, you know, I just described a day and what exactly I was doing in that day. And it was super specific and what I was wearing and what I was eating and where I was going from where, but I didn't talk at all about what kind of person I want to be and why I'm doing those things that I'm doing in that day. And my other group members were really, theirs were really strong in saying, whatever I'm doing, this is the kind of person I want to be. This is why I want to be doing what I'm doing. This is what I'm inspired by and things like that. So it was super interesting to see our different approaches and then the different things that came out of that.
That's fantastic. I know when I wrote my first vision too, I had some really specific things, and then I heard my coworker's vision. And I did go back and change mine. One of the things that I had really specifically said was that I want to be able to talk about all of these Zingerman's words with my partner. And at the time I didn't have a partner, but my husband now, he actually worked at Zingerman's too. So we really do talk about visioning and all of these words. He understands what I mean. So it's awesome. Would like to share next?
So one of the things, if I can go, one of the things that I found the most interesting about my group, there's 3 of us and we each picked like a different season. So my day was in the winter and Sam's day was in the fall and Elliot's day was in the spring. And so that was just cool to see. I think that kind of, I don't know, I love the winter. And so that's just, you know, I picture my life on a cold day, kind of like today, maybe a little later in the season. And I think that that can kind of reveal a decent amount about, you know, the life that you picture for yourself, especially living in Michigan, because the weather controls so much of our, you know, whether we go on a run or, you know, work out inside and all those daily things that we get to do. So I thought that that was really cool.
Absolutely.
Great.
I think Gregory, did you unmute yourself as well?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I just thought it was interesting of the different ways that people kind of interpreted this. Like me, I did a narrative, but there was also another person that wrote down like bullet points and another that did like a thank you, like a little letter to self. And I also was just inspired by their personal development and their growth that they saw in their vision plan. I'm definitely more professional, like, you know, here are my goals, here's this, and this, kind of outline like that. But it kind of like inspired me to kind of like take a look at like my personal development and like how I see myself in the next year growing as a person.
Great. Awesome.
For me, I actually I wrote a narrative and then I like completely felt like I was writing a movie. So I started writing curse words towards the end of it because I like curse words, how they like write on the paper. But so when I was reading mine, I set mine into like 5 years from now. And I was like in this really like bougie apartment. So I guess I have really good things planned for me because And then I figured, I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I moved to Grand Rapids for school, and I thought I was going to end up staying here. But in my narrative, I was in downtown Miami, so apparently I will not be staying here. So it's really like eye opening that like I was just writing, and I like turned out to be in a completely different state than I was.
That's great. And again, you're not obligated to do what you wrote, but it is interesting what comes out. And having done this a lot, and speaking of myself as being a big overthinker, it's very easy to overanalyze, self-critique. You know, I start to go, well, maybe I'll do this. Yeah, but maybe I should do this. And then you read an article that tells you shouldn't do that. And then it's really crazy making. And literally, and what I have come to realize is in our hearts, most of us know most of the time what we really want. And whether you choose to do it or not is a different question. But at the stage you're at, I mean, really, you can do anything. And I know that's almost too big to, but when you actually write it down, there's something to it. And it's John O'Donohue, who I referenced last night, said your soul always knows the direction you want to go. And I think this is really a way to tap into that. And is it Jania? Jenya?
Janaya.
Janaya, thank you. I'm, as somebody who has a name that's been mispronounced for my whole life, I'm sensitive. Janaya put in there, it's about, I'm a big daydreamer. This is essentially like a waking dream, but you're writing it down. And I, for many of us, me included, it's almost a sense of big relief because it's been bouncing around in there, making us crazy because the other noise is so loud. And like you can hear this faint voice that's actually your own voice. And this is putting your own voice out into the world. And I'll just say, if you feel, some of you will feel super confident with what you wrote and some not. If you don't feel great about what you wrote, just do it again. And what I've found is, like, if you sit from scratch 3-4 days out of a week and just start from scratch, the stuff that's really in your heart will come out. And we only gave you 10 minutes today, but really, like, if you came to the 2 days Ink Train seminar, you would do that for 45 minutes. And the longer you write, the more cool stuff's going to come out. So I think the point is that the hot pen is very powerful. It seems simple, but we tend on our own just to sit there and agonize and analyze and discuss about what we think. But this is really about what we feel is right for us.
Shall we get into some next steps?
I think we just did. So the next steps, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what I would suggest, I mean, clearly you can ignore this and throw it away. But like I said, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not big on hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating when I say this changed my life, and that I wish when I was 20 that I knew how to do this, because I would have written one and I wouldn't have known what job I wanted either, but I definitely would have been able to say that I wanted to learn and I wanted to be doing cool stuff and I wanted to be around art and music and I wanted to be in a place I felt good about living or whatever. So what I would suggest is, if you feel good about what you wrote, just take it out and add to it. Like, go through it and see, as you get better at this, you're going to be able to identify over time more and more, like, oh, that's my mother. Oh, that's my dad. He always says that, but I don't really want to do that. So this allows you to sort of get more and more in touch with where it's your voice and where it's the other people's voices. And I'm not, if you want to do something because your dad wants it, by all means do it, but make a free choice to do it because of that. Don't do it because you feel like you have to or you should, because that's kind of doomed. So review, redraft. I give myself 3 or 4 times because I can fall into perfectionism. I'll just keep working on it for like 4 years, which isn't that helpful. My suggestion is, after 2, 3, 4 redrafts, you start to share it with other people. If there's people in this group that you feel comfortable with, that like Ariana described so beautifully, can be believing mirrors for you. In other words, they can listen without sounding like the board of directors that's going to tell you all the reasons it won't work. then go to them. And then sort of expand your I like to expand the circle, starting with the people I feel most calm and comfortable with, and then grow it out, and then leave the people who are going to be the most critical and potentially the most cynical about it for last, because it helps me build my confidence in what I'm doing. But that's up to you. If you don't like what you wrote, like I said, I would just sit down and start over again. And like I said, 10 minutes is kind of short. Like, you can do a lot in 10 minutes. I don't know if people were surprised by how much they got done in 10 minutes. Mostly I am. So when you just keep writing for half an hour, 40 minutes, it's kind of wild how much cool stuff's going to come out. The details just get better. So we use the acronym ACEs for those people: advisory, content experts, but it's people who can give you input, but come at it from a positive and supportive place. Yes, Marlena, I have the same question. This would be far more effective in my perspective than a college application. Like, they basically let you in to spend a ton of money, but you have no clue where you're going. Which, by the way, writing a vision that says I had no clue where I was going and that's why I went, right? It's sort of like wandering in the wilderness is my goal. Then I think that's awesome. Like, you don't need to have this clear thing of what you're doing. Just say, like, for the next year, I just experimented. I tried stuff. I read really wild books. I had no idea what the end of the year was going to be like, but it's worked out so great. Like, that's a vision. Okay, so yeah, I don't know why it's not put out in all of these forms. And part of our new 2032 vision at Zingerman's includes starting to do work with younger people. So even teaching this to like 8, 9, 10-year-olds, because it is really a life skill. And really, like I said, anybody who's doing great things, whether it's in parenting or in writing poetry or a professional athlete, they all have a vision in their head of where they're going, and it really helps them to hold course. If you've run a marathon, you envision finishing it, and it helps you keep going when partway through you want to stop. So I think really that's one of the keys. And then at some point, I'm going to suggest you stop redrafting and stop editing, and it becomes basically the blueprint for your dream home. Because if you keep changing it every 3 days, it's great, but you're not really going to make much headway. Okay. Once you have the vision, I want to suggest a couple positive things that really come from it. It's much easier to make decisions. Okay. So if you know that you want to move to Miami, back to Miami, that's great. Then when people start saying we should move to Alaska, it's like, well, that's an awesome idea, but I'm already moving to Miami. So it allows you to make decisions more quickly because it's not in a vacuum. The other thing that I believe you'll find is when people around you know where you're going, they will help you much more effectively. Like I said, the advice they're giving you is intended to help, but it's basically steering you towards the vision that they have for you. Once you fill the space with your own vision, you're going to find, especially in the very connected world that you and I are living in, that you know somebody who knows somebody who can provide you the support. So if you wrote in your vision that you have an internship to Thailand 3 years from now, I'll bet you there's somebody on this group who knows somebody whose cousin or parent or uncle or aunt is an executive in a company that has an office in Thailand, and you will find yourself there. So there's a lot of power that's going to come from this. Bless you, Sam. And I really recommend it. I'm going to paste in the chat too, just Octavia Butler is a very interesting science fiction writer whose work I love. And I didn't know about her I knew about her, but I didn't realize this piece. But she actually, years ago, she wrote by hand a vision for her own life, just so you could see how this plays out in a way that's not 100% how we do it here, but 85% the same, and she really made it happen. So Ariana, I'm going to just say my email is ari@zingermans.com. Mara, if you want to paste the e-news link in there, and people can sign up for that. It's free, and it'll give you something to distract you from your homework. And please reach out if I can be a help. And my vision is that a year from now, the pandemic is winding down. that we've followed the flight plan of the Spanish flu, which we seem to be doing, and that we're vaccinated and not having to wear masks everywhere we go, and that I can actually wait on you at the Roadhouse or the deli and serve you in person. So thank you for putting up with Zoom, and thank you for putting up with us. And I really hope this helps. Please reach out with questions or ask for help. We want to make this a productive day for you.
Awesome.
And I'll just say there's a lot more in the books. Ariana, can I close with a quote, or you want to say a few things and then I'll do it?
I know Grace wanted to say a couple of things.
Grace, you want to go first or me? I don't care.
I have like boring administrative things.
Yeah, you do
so-
yours and we'll end on a note of inspiration.
I apologize that I have to be the bearer of boring administrative things.
Somebody
First of all, thank you. Thanks for giving me that at least. Ari and Ariana, Mara, thank you so much. I personally loved this, and I was really grateful to be a learner with you all today and actively be able to be in a small group. And so really grateful for that. Excited to keep this practice going. So with that, I am going to pop into the chat, like we always do, a quick Google form, so that you all can give us feedback on this, and then we can share that with you all at Train. But that just kind of helps us with our curriculum going forward. We always have a feedback form. And then this is, so those of you who are students here on this call, this is our second to last event together this semester. Somehow we are at the end of the semester. Next week is our last event. So know that. I'm really looking forward to our last self-reflection. Our content is going to be social justice. So today I think we did a really great practice of engaging really deeply with one another, and just be ready for next Friday to be a similar style. We're going to be doing a lot of reflective work. So come ready to engage. Next Friday, a few annoying administrative things, and I apologize. If you have not already, please submit a gratitude video. It's been in our Blackboard posts. We're hoping to create, we typically do handwritten letters to our donors that allow us to have this program happen, but we aren't able to do that because we don't see you all in person. So if you could create a quick video, that'll help us just get your faces and get your stories in front of our donors. Additionally, next Friday is our last Habitat for Humanity option before our self-reflection. So if you're available, if you're comfortable, please sign up to serve for Habitat for Humanity. They definitely are low on volunteers, and they have been doing, I went last week, and I'll say definitely I respect all of your comfortabilities through this pandemic, and I don't want you to be uncomfortable or feel unsafe, but masks are worn the entire time, and they have indoor and outdoor options, and they have a maximum of 5 people on site with a couple staff members. So I guess maximum of 10 people. So do what's comfortable, but if you're available, please volunteer to serve for Habitat. Mentor meetings, at this point, you should have at least had 1 mentor meeting, unless you're Sam, and I apologize, Sam, I'm still working, or Ben, sorry, Ben, I'm still working. So make sure you're doing mentor meetings before this, and then applications for this program is opening in just 2 weeks, or in just 1 month. So nominations are open now. Nominate your friends, tell your people about it. I think that those are all of my annoying administrative updates. So I will kick it back to Ari to leave us in an inspirational way. Thank you.
Okay, just 2 quotes and a poetic, or 1 quote and a poetic thought to send you on your way. I got a lot of quotes. I like to learn from other people. This is from Robin Kelly, who's a professor of African American intellectual history. Used to teach at U of M, and now he's at UCLA. I find his work really fascinating and insightful. And he said, without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. We not only end up confused, rudderless, and cynical, but we forget that making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us. So without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. And then just the line from poetry is from Marge Piercy, Piercy, who had a line in a poem that always stuck with me because it's basically sums up what visioning is. And she said, we're trying to live as if we are an experiment conducted by the future. We're trying to live as if we are an experiment conducted by the future. So this brought me back to Yeram's point from where we started, which is start now, because I know life seems like it's going to go forever, but it's not. And the sooner that you start to be true to who you are and make the life you want to lead, the more rewarding everything gets. So thank you all so much for the time to spend the time with you this morning, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. If you want to unmute yourself real quick for a goodbye, we appreciate all of you. Thank you and best wishes with your visions.
See you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.